Hey everyone, we'll give everyone just a few more minutes for people who are running a little late.
So is everyone in South Carolina?
No, they're all over the place.
Oh,
Yeah.
disturbing.
Yeah. Yeah. They could be, nearby to you.
Could be in my pantry or my
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Hiding in the closet, hiding under my desk.
Yeah. If you feel a hand, just start to reach up.
Exactly. It's coiling around my ankle. So wait, what book did y'all do the month before?
We did Clay's book.
Oh, the which one? The
Wake
new
up and
one?
open your eyes. Yeah.
Okay. And then what are y'all doing next?
Our Winter Monster and then Buffalo Hunter. There's so much coming out this year.
I know. I've got a stack of books. I was like, oh, see what's new. Haven't touched them.
I'm excited for Nat Cassidy's new book. So,
The Wolf?
hmm
Yeah, it's good.
it's great.
Yeah. It's very feels very throwback, kind of like big and epic and um very very not troubled with issues of my child is dead, which a lot of horror seems to be about right now.
Yeah, that is a big trend right now. I hope we
Or
move.
maybe that was the previous trend. I think this trend is like my child is traumatized.
Yeah, or your child might be a demon.
Or yeah, either one.
Yeah, which I guess would be traumatizing for your child.
I don't know. I mean, the child's irrelevant. I mean, I guess the demon displaces the child. So child is semi-relevant, but
Yeah, that's true. I guess it's traumatizing for the parents, but the kid doesn't know.
yeah, the kid doesn't know. Kid doesn't exist anymore.
No, they've been possessed.
Yeah. I always like to assume that at the end of the Exorcist, Regan is like, she's just like, the demon's still in there. They're just like, oh, this is so boring. I'm just gonna like pretend I'm normal until everyone leaves.
That's honestly how it would be.
Yeah. Just like, so tired of being tied to this bed. I'm just gonna pretend everything's fine now.
Just duping everyone.
Yeah. I'll just like kill puppies on the side when no one's looking
It's
to get
grim.
my like demonic, well, to get my demonic fix, right? They
That's
got to be
true.
doing evil stuff.
Yeah, gotta do some like low grade demon activity.
Yeah, they
Exactly.
they did a TV show where Reagan had a kid and the kid gets possessed by the same demon. It's like come back for her. Yeah.
Oh, geez.
It was pretty good. I like that kind
Were
of type
they
of
were
stuff.
they like old buddies? Was it like Lethal Weapon 4?
If only. No, she was like trying to fight it off, like, oh no, don't take my child.
Uh,
Typical child feeling traumatized type thing, but
I
it
could
was
see
pretty
it
decent.
going in a yeah, I could see it going in a whole Casablanca direction, out of all the children and all the houses to possess. You had to possess my daughter.
Yeah. So lucky.
Puke it again, Regan, puke it again. That song we loved.
I think you're onto something here.
I know, right?
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So, hi
Okay.
everyone. So nice to see you guys. I am recording this, just an FYI, so you know. You don't not have to be on camera, totally your choice. So excited to talk about Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. We have Grady, who needs no introduction, but I will give him a small one. He is the New York Times bestselling novelist of such books as How to Sell a Haunted House, The Final Girl Support Group, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Seeing Vampires, my personal favorite, Paperbacks from Hell, hence the numerous paperbacks behind me. And his newest novel is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Grady.
Yeah. Now wait, where do you do your paperback shopping? You don't have to tell me your sweet spots, but are you actually finding places in South Carolina that haven't been cleaned out?
No, I mean occasionally Mr. K's in Greenville will have stuff, but it's
Yeah.
rare. I usually do well at Edward McKay, or I guess it's now just like McKay in Winston when I visit my parents.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go clean it out.
But well, I will tell you this. Please don't. I will tell you this other spot because I don't want people to clean this one out privately in Raleigh that Will Erickson told me about.
Oh, okay. I'll have to, yeah. Well, I sort of stopped picking up horror paperbacks and used bookstores just because there's not much out there anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm going like more for crime and westerns and post-nuclear men's adventure weirdness.
Well, you can always find a lot of Westerns though too. So
Yeah, I'm not as big on them, but I'm trying to get into them. It's just like it has to be really good for me to get interested. Whereas horror novel can be crap and I'm interested.
Yeah, I agree with that. I find a lot of stuff though. I mean, like sometimes you can just find like things that you're looking for relatively cheap on thrift books still, but you have to like score
Yeah,
pretty well.
I hate ordering online though because everyone sticks those big inventory stickers on
Yeah,
everything, which is such a drag.
yeah, that really sinks. Um,
My life is full of woe and misery.
it's a big
Those
champagne problem to be
Yeah,
honest,
those
but
Ukrainian war refugees, they don't know how lucky they have it. I got
yeah,
inventory stickers on my paperbacks.
yeah, they don't know how hard it is to find a good paperback in a used
Whew,
bookstore
I
nowadays.
know. Have they tried to look for Voice of a Clown? No.
God. The one that still haunts me is Hellhound, the tour cover.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So if anyone ever
I
sees it, please let me know.
think Will has two.
Are you okay? Well, that's good to know.
I think. I'm not sure.
I might have to beg Will. Um, so I have like kind of this is probably a hot question to start with, but I'm curious if the overturn of Roe impacted any of your editing decisions for Witchcraft.
No. It's funny. I didn't even really realize I didn't, I didn't really think about any political issues or reproductive rights issues when I was writing this. And then like 10 months, 8 months, 9 months in, I was like, oh crap, this book all about like reproductive rights is coming out in like August of an election year that's going to revolve around reproductive rights. I'm not the most thoughtful person. And then I screwed up the deadline. So it got bumped to January. And I was like, oh, just as bad. Um, so it really didn't cross my mind. And the fact is, maternity homes changed a lot with Roe. I mean, it really, a lot closed down, a lot repurposed and became more homes for single mothers who weren't necessarily, hiding from anything. Oftentimes, they needed access to a safe place to stay or just shelter, really. Some of them turned into more of women's homes, doing like services for domestic violence victims and things like that. And some stayed homes. I mean, there was a really famous case in oh gosh, I think it was Texas. I think I just want to make sure I'm getting it right because I'd hate to say the wrong. I'd hate for people to hate Texas more than they already do. Um, uh, wait, it was. Oh yeah, it was Texas. Yeah, or yeah, no, Missouri. The Bethesda Home for Girls in Missouri, which had been a maternity home and stayed as one, and was, eventually there was a lot of abuse there and things like that. And the guy who ran that was from Texas, and he had a couple of other maternity homes, and I think he was convicted of a lot of stuff. But so the homes kind of repurposed in a lot of ways. Like the Florence Crittenden homes are still around, but they're not the same kind of things. They more provide support for pregnant women. But there was just a big New York Times thing last year about maternity homes in Florida that were having a lot of issues. I mean, they still exist. I was just in South Carolina in December and drove through past a sign for a Florence Crittenden home looking for foster families for pregnant teenagers. I have a cousin who does family law who actually consulted a little on the book, who she's like, this stuff goes on every day. She's like, I deal with clients all the time who are pregnant teenagers. Their parents are freaking out and trying to figure out a way to hide them. She's like, mono is a pretty classic story people use. So, Roe changed the homes. I mean, definitely the big groups, Catholic Charities, Salvation Army, Crittenden, they, really pivoted in what they did. But maternity homes still exist, in one
Yeah.
fashion or another.
Yeah. I think of, I mean, it's not the exact equivalent, but I kind of think too of like pregnancy centers that you'll see where, women go in and they think they're abortion clinics, but really
Oh
they're
yeah.
like try to convince you to keep this child and like we have options for you and it's still kind of
Oh yeah. I
weighing
have a
that right.
different cousin who runs one of those.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, yeah, so when people talk about how, and it's interesting, and this isn't to slam anyone's politics, but when people talk about like, oh, now that Roe's gone, these homes are going to be coming back. I'm like, homes never left.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I mean, people still deal with pregnant, unmarried women just as shittily as they ever did. It's not like Rose suddenly was a magic wand that made people actually like single moms. They just suddenly had more resources and more recourses. So, you know, what that's one of the things that really for me, writing the book was really a surprise, is just how much as a society we really hate single mothers, and we've always hated them and we continue to hate them. And you know, you don't, the language changes, but the level of hate fluctuates a little, but it really doesn't change a whole lot. There is nothing that seems to bring out the worst in people more than a single woman having a baby.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's completely fair. So I felt bad during my reread because I realized that I completely forgot Fern has a real name, that she's given a real
Oh,
name at the beginning of the book, and
yeah.
then she's quickly turned to Fern, so she's Neva, and then she becomes Fern. Was this a conscious choice on your part to hope that like the reader, while you're reading it, kind of forgets her identity too outside of the book?
No, that was me. I forgot.
Okay.
And actually, I'd written a couple of drafts before. I was like, oh shit, she needs a name. There was a brief moment where I was doing a whole Daphne du Maurier and Rebecca thing where I was like, no, she'll just be, you know, nameless. And that didn't work. That's I hats off to Daphne for pulling that off. For Rebecca's a really long book. I couldn't
Yeah.
even do that for a single chapter. So no, and in fact, people when they talk about Neva, I'm always like, in my head, it's always Fern.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, and part of it is, and I kind of wondered about that, like what was wrong with me? Was I just stupid? And I realized that one, I knew how the book was going to end from the moment I was writing it. And there is something with women who went to the homes or were sent to the homes where they talk about feeling like to some sense they're still trapped there. They're still trapped. There's this piece of unfinished business that they'll never move on from, that they'll never forget, that will never be done. And so I realized that, you know, yeah, in a way, like uh, you know, for Neva, there's a chunk of her that's always going to be Fern. That's always until she meets her daughter again. There's a chunk of her that's still in that. I mean, Rose says it at the end. You know, she's still 15. She's still stuck in that home on some level until she can stop that bleeding.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean I just felt like I felt guilty when I was reading it that I'm like, "Oh, you're an actual person." Like, and I know
Yeah.
she's a character,
Well,
but I
and
felt
some
bad for her.
yeah, and someone just said in the chat about how it made her feel like a real person, and that's definitely true. Like
Yeah.
one of the things I always have a problem with is getting my characters to work. And Fern was really the last one to sort of start working. And it really wasn't until I sort of went back and was like, okay, her name's Neva, you know, this is her life, and sort of really figured out all that stuff on a really epic level, not just in relationship to the home, that she sort of like took on the life she needed to.
That makes sense. So I mean I think overall there's a lot of darkness in this book. But to me one of the darkest parts is one realizing how young Holly is.
Mm,
And then also realizing how young Holly was when her abuse started.
yeah.
And then when you realize who was abusing her, which is, this reverend that her family trusts and she seemingly trusts too until he starts abusing her. Could you talk about the formation of Holly and like where her character came from?
Yeah, Holly went through a lot of changes. There's a couple of drafts of this book that had no witches in it, and Holly was really different in those drafts. And then I was sort of like, you know, but it was always sort of the basics were always there. And then there came a point where I was like, okay, I got to sit down and really think Holly through. And I was like, oh, you know, I mean, and the basics there, sorry, let me just jump back to that for a second. The basics there, you know, one of the things I always thought was really interesting is I grew up in I mean, I was born in the 70s, but grew up really in the 80s. And that was sort of stranger danger time. And there was this real idea that, you know, someone was going to abduct your kids in a white van, or, you know, someone was going to molest them, or all this stuff. And really, the people doing that, you know, the calls coming from inside the house. The people who are going to do that are usually trusted family friends, family members. people like that. And so, and one of the things reading about the maternity homes is, that frequently a girl was sent away and it was incest, was the problem here. I mean, the pregnancy was the problem, but what the family wasn't confronting was the incest that resulted in the pregnancy. And so that was something that I was very, I knew I wanted with Holly. But apart from that, um, really Holly went through a lot of changes. And the big one was when I started realizing, really, which wasn't a lot of fun, but really figuring out sort of the details of her abuse. Because then I was like, oh, well, the home's going to be kind of nice for her, actually. Like,
Yeah.
it's actually, but, and I was like, and of course she's not going to want to talk to anyone. No one believes her when she talks. And I was like, and of course she's not going to take baths. She always has to take baths. Like, and so that was really, you know, really figuring that part of it out was in her behavior and all that stuff was where she really came over the finish line for me. But I mean, there was a couple of drafts where the person who molested her was not human. And those were very early drafts, which had no witches in them, which were like really weird. And so she was having like Satan's baby, not really Satan's baby, but like, like a Pan's baby. And also for a long time, Polly was 13. And there were actually a couple of drafts when she was 12. And it was really a fight with my editor. Was my editor's like, absolutely not. Are we showing a 13-year-old girl giving birth? And I was like, 14. She's like, fine. So for some reason, like an imaginary 13-year-old giving birth was much more disturbing than an imaginary 14-year-old giving birth. But I mean, one of the things with the homes, and someone had asked me this before about, oh, I was talking to a UK interviewer, and they're like, this is really Dickensian. How much did you exaggerate? And I was like, not. I was like, I wanted this home to be sort of not as bad as some were. Like there were homes that were way better than this, and there were homes that were way worse than this. I wanted this to be firmly kind of in the middle. Like it's not so bad compared to what could be happening. And one of the things with that was, oh, sorry, I lost the train of my thought. How did I start that tangent?
You were talking about the UK being asking like
Oh,
how, yeah.
yeah. And one of the things was there were a lot of women who went to these homes who were 19, 20, 21, 22. And probably some even older in a few rare instances who really had nowhere to turn. But there were girls getting sent to this home, I mean, as young as 11, 12, 13. So it wasn't a stretch to make Holly 13.
Yeah, it is interesting that your editor's like, okay, well, 14's like, that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if it got the book made, I was really scared she was gonna be like 17. I was like, that doesn't work.
Yeah, that's not,
Um,
I mean, it's sad, but it's not as heartbreaking as
well,
younger.
it's not as heartbreaking, and also the dynamics different. I
Yeah.
mean, one of the reasons these girls care about Holly is she fit for them, she's something to take care of. And I say something really consciously. I think a lot of these girls are, when they first come into these homes, in the book, they're looking for comfort. They're looking for a security blanket. And Holly doesn't talk. Holly just sort of hangs out. Holly just sort of latches onto you and follows you around. I mean, I think the reason Fern and Rose and stuff latch on to Holly at first is because she is kind of like a doll, to them. And it's not, and so she needs to be younger than them. You know what I mean? And like, and I'm not trying to nag anyone. I'm just saying, like oftentimes we're like, my best friend is someone I met because I thought they were hot when I started talking to them, or I thought they were really cool and knew some people, or were in a band or something. Like we often start interacting with people for reasons that don't reflect really well on the fullness of our character, and then later they're a person, and Holly's a person to them, but at first she's not, and not talking and being so much younger and being a small kid. Those are the things that really like let them project a lot of their needs onto her.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. The other, I guess it feels like the opposite of Holly is definitely Rose to me. I mean, she seems like the strong character. She's
Mhm.
to me like the really like resolved one out of the group and like the stubborn one. But then to see her really I guess when Diane gives her the shot to make her go into labor early, and like they kind of like upset her to the point where they have to, and then she has the baby, and they're like, well, if you want it, like we're gonna lock you away, and she ends up, relenting.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, to me, that really feels like crushing the rest of the girls' kind of hope and like their outcomes and like what can we do to go forward. Was there ever a version of the book where Rose ended up taking Blossom home and having her, or
No.
not relenting? Yeah,
No,
okay.
no. I mean, one of the things I think that a lot of people discover, I mean, I certainly, it's easy to talk, and it's another thing
Yeah.
to really do. And, I mean, I, I've, when the pedal hits when the rubber hits the road, the pedal hit the rubber hits the
I
road,
think the
some
rubber.
metaphor like that. Yeah, it's very, and like you can totally understand. I mean, I've talked to people about civil disobedience before, and you want to go through worst case scenarios with everyone so they're prepared. And some people are like, is it really committed? Good people are like, I'm out. I don't want a part of this. And I totally get it. And there's no shame in that. But it's one thing to, say what you want and all these things. It's another thing to really stand your ground when the whole world is against you. And, one of the things that happened over and over and over again when you read about the Holmes won. The system wins over and over again. This was a system designed to separate single mothers from their children and put them up for adoption. And it was a system that worked.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, my next question's about Miss Wellwood and like how she's not a direct, like she's not in the homes, but you find out through this flashback that she was an unwed mother herself and
Yeah.
gave her baby away. And I think when I first read this book, I really expected that to change my opinion of her, but it ended up more just being angrier at her for how she treats the girls.
Oh, poor Miss Wellwood.
I know I do feel bad for her, but it is like you would expect her to have more sympathy, but on the same time, I feel like she's also like, well, I went through this and I survived, so like, kind of toughen up a bit.
Yeah. Well, also, she really, one thing that changed with this book a lot while I was writing it is in the first few drafts, I really cared about these girls. And I say girls very consciously when I'm talking about them because I don't ever want anyone to forget that these were teenagers, these were kids being
Yeah.
put in this situation, I mean, I know I could say young ladies or young women or something, but they were kids. They were girls. And that's something that I find so horrifying about the Holmes. But one thing that kept really happening that I found very frustrating is I really cared about these girls. I'd read Anne Fessler's The Girls Who Went Away, which is an oral history of the Holmes, which is kind of the only history of the Holmes out there. There's Wake Up Little Susie, which is about the Black experience with Holmes. It's more academic than really the only popular history I could find was The Girls Who Went Away. And so I'd read all these accounts. I had people I loved and cared about in my family who'd been sent away. And so I cared about these girls from the get go. And one thing that was so frustrating with my editor, with other readers, and things like that is people would say things like, oh, these girls are just so obnoxious. Like, why don't they just, this is the best thing for them. Have the baby. What are they supposed to do? Raise a baby and go to high school? Like, I'm just going to smack these girls. And two things came out of that. One was it made me really angry at myself mostly because I was like, I'm not writing, I'm not good enough to make these people see these girls the way I am. I've got all these assumptions um, about these girls. I'm starting at the 30 yards down the road from everyone else, and I'm leaving readers behind, and I'm fucking it up. And it was really that was really hard. That was not fun to hate myself so much for such a prolonged period of time. And the other thing it made me realize is everyone in the home thinks they're doing the best thing for these girls. And I was like, of course, everyone, a lot of people thought this was the best thing. Miss Wellwood she's not a dick. She thinks she's doing these girls a favor. And it's like, it's tough, it's hard, but it's the only option.
Yeah.
Dr. Vincent, bit of a drinker, but he also feels like he's doing, that he's basically like, volunteering to go out into the wilderness and do missionary work here. Diane thinks she's really helping these girls. They all think they're doing the best thing. And so I can't hate on them too much. I mean, they do hateful shit, but they're trying. And and what was interesting was a lot of people have said to me, well, what were the options? And you look at sort of the way this plays out with Black families at the time. I mean, during the whole baby scoop era, which is basically into World War II, which is 45, to Roe, which is 73. And during that whole era, I think it was something like 70 some odd percent of Black unwed mothers, the baby stayed in the family. It was raised by the baby was raised by a relative. There was an interfamilial adoption. The baby went to friends who raised it, and the mother was sometimes still involved. But it was a very different experience. And sometimes that's because there weren't I mean, there were Black maternity homes and they were later integrated maternity homes. But sometimes it was because there weren't the resources. Sometimes they're because there wasn't the access to information. Sometimes it was also because that was the way Black families did this. I mean,
Yeah.
Black families statistically, even now, are far more likely to keep an older relative living with the nuclear family than white families are. And so it was just, so there was another option. There was an option that worked. I mean, those babies in those Black families did not grow up with different outcomes than they would have if they'd been adopted by a stranger adoption. Like, the outcomes were not different. Like, those kids were just as likely to be happy and have a great life as anyone else. So there was an option, but not for white people. In some families, it was very, I mean, it's like 25% of Black families, for them, the girls did go to maternity homes, and
Yeah.
there were several very famous ones in the States and integrated ones.
Yeah. Could you talk about the decision to make to go from describing Fern in the hospital to describing her as a patient when she's starting to go into the labor process? Because it's at first I thought I was reading someone else's point of view. Like, I thought Fern was watching
Mhm.
a patient. And so I mean, I think that's, to me, like one of the best parts of the book. It's super creative. I thought it was really genius of you, but I'm curious,
Oh,
like, what
thanks,
into
genius.
that?
I'll take it. Yeah. So, man, this book, there were moments with this book where the drafts were so square, like they were so square, and I was like writing about magic and ritual magic and all this stuff and stuff that, like, I got really into writing the book, and I'm like, why is this book so square when I'm describing basically people having these insane psychedelic experiences? And so I just started breaking a lot of rules, and then some of them, a draft later, I rolled stuff back. There was a really, during one of the very first time they cast a spell, I had this thing where all the girls, for like a prolonged chunk of that ritual, like changed bodies with each other, and like it was fun, and like it doesn't tip itself off to the reader right away. And that was fun, but it was also very confusing. And also, what was the point? I was just showing off. But but I realized with stuff like that birth scene and things like that, like having that shift in perspective really worked. And I can't remember, does it happen with Dr. Vincent when she gets her internal? I don't think it does.
I don't think so.
Yeah, there was a version where that was the first time it happened, where it immediately shifts to Dr. Vincent's point of view, because I didn't want to write from the point of view of a 15-year-old getting her first internal
Yeah.
exam, and I thought it worked. And what was interesting with that is a lot of women who read that draft were like, big shrug, like, this scene is boring. They're like, yeah, you're 15. I was like, well, you're 15, you're far from home, you've never had an internal, like, and it's being administered by a guy you've never met before, who's old enough to be your dad, and that's going to be painful and mortifying and awful. And they're like, yeah, welcome to the rest of your life. Bite a nail, bite a nail. Someone actually said to me, bite a nail, sweetheart, which is why I have the nurse say that at one point. And I was like, yeah, they're right. I've likened it to that video on TikTok of the cramp machine,
Oh,
that you strap on, and it induces like menstrual cramps and simulates them. And dudes put it on, and they're like, take it off. It was like, I was that dude. I was like, this seems appalling. And most of the women who were reading it were like, yeah, and like, welcome to my life. And so it was like, to me it seemed like this horrible thing, and it was just, I was the guy coming in and being like, it smells terrible in here. Has no one noticed? And everyone's like, that's because it's a slaughterhouse, dude. Get used to it. It's where we work. Um, so I took that one out, but I still, that shift I thought still worked there, because one of the things that came out talking to a lot of OBs who knew about obstetric practice, even as, I mean, always, but I'm appalled at how many emails and I get from moms or people I meet who just had terrible birth experiences because, the doctor was just a dick. And not always a male doctor either. And asshole doctorism seems to know no gender boundaries. But I talked to a couple of OBs who really were experienced with obstetrics in the 80s and the 90s. And they were like, oh, yeah, I mean, they're like, I've watched inductions because the doctor wants to get home by 5 on a Friday and doesn't want to stick around the hospital on his day off. I've watched inductions because people are bored. Like, she's like, I've seen cesarean scheduled because the doctor is just like, I'm going on vacation on the 14th and we better get this done on the 13th. And so switching the point of view just made it seem very cold and clinical. I don't want to, I'm not sure people want to get this deep in the weeds, but, the whole Ina May Gaskin midwifery movement that came around in the early 70s, as much as people make fun of it now for hippy dippy bullshit, man, it was such a necessary corrective at the time. And like, she was really a brave individual to do what she did. And yeah, I get it, and it, and I think labor and delivery and pregnancy is definitely not one size fits all. Like, as long as the baby's healthy, the mom's healthy, and the mom has had the birth experience she wants, who gives a shit how you get there? But I really think people like Ina May Gaskin really changed a lot of things by pushing back against this how medicalized birth was getting at the time, and not and medicalized in a clinical way. Someone made a point, and then I'll shut up because I could go on about this. But someone made a point that at the time, a midwife whose interview I read from the early 70s was like, doctors are very good at curing disease. Hospitals are very good at identifying, diagnosing, treating and curing disease. Childbirth is not a disease. A hospital is not built for that. And we're trying to fit a round peg into a square hole, and it's really, damaging mothers.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I know it's gotten better, but especially in the US, like, we still have some of the worst statistics for maternal deaths. So
yeah.
I don't know if
well,
it's
there's a crazy story from the early 2000s in California, I think Santa Rosa, but I'm not 100% sure, where an obstetric staff, a small rural hospital had 2 obstetricians on staff, and they were just crazy overworked. And so they brought in a couple of midwives and gave them admitting privileges and things like that. And the infant mortality at the hospital plunged.
Yeah.
And maternal outcomes just were so much, birth outcomes were so much better. And after 3 years of this, the OBs were like, get those fucking midwives out of here. They're making us look terrible. And like and unfortunately within 3 years after that, the statistics had ticked back up to where they were. I'm not saying that's all OBs, I'm not saying that's all hospitals, but it's just one of those examples that really stuck in my head. Anyways, I'll shut up.
No, you're fine. I do want to open it up to questions from everyone that's on. So if you have a question, feel free to take yourself off mute.
Yeah, bring it. Don't be shy. I'll answer anything. About the book, about whatever.
So
I got one. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yeah, go ahead. Take it.
Okay. So Grady, first of all, thank you for writing this book. It was like an incredible read.
Oh, thanks for reading it.
Yeah, I'm shocked that you had people saying they found the girls like annoying to the point that they couldn't sympathize with them, or that they were getting almost what they deserved. Because it was almost like it was kind of overwhelming to me reading this book, like the empathy you kind of imbued it with. Like,
thanks.
It's just overwhelming what the girls are going through. And so I'm wondering, did you edit it after that, or did these people like all the way through were like, I don't know, maybe they should be in this?
Oh no! I mean, like some of them came around, some of them didn't. I mean, my editor definitely came around, and it was a me problem, really. And one of the things is, I mean, this book had 14, it had a lot of drafts, but there were 14 major drafts.
Mm.
And I would say for at least 6 or 7 of them, I really was like, it's set in 1970, but I don't want this to feel like old timey times. I don't want people to feel like removed from the story. So I'm going to make it first person and present tense. And because I was like, I want this feeling like it's happening now. And I want I want them in Fern's head. And I realized that the temperature on that was too hot. It was so alienating to people who were reading it. It was just like, people needed a couple of things. People needed the tone to go down a little because it was being written from the point of view of a pregnant 15-year-old who feels like their life is over. So the emotional level was way dialed up. And Fern's reactions to things were way dialed up. And Fern's ignorance. Like in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, there were actually, and it differed all over the country, but in general, public schools did a pretty good job of teaching sex education. And in the late 60s, I would say about 66 forward, a lot of schools got pushback that they were teaching too much sex education and making it too explicit. And so it was taken out of the curriculum in a lot of public schools, or really like, really dumbed down. So, Fern was showing up with no knowledge of her body, of sex, of anything. And people were thinking, people were reading it, were like, she's a moron. Like that was their reaction. She's stupid. And I got it. Like, because so by making it third person and past tense, it gave readers some distance from sort of the heat of that stuff, which I think really helped with people. Like once the girls were not like rah in your face, it was like they were over there. You could sort of step back and sort of see them better, I think, for some readers. And also having that authorial voice that, even though it's subtle or maybe not, I was able to differentiate what were things that the girls were ignorant about because they hadn't been taught it, and what was just girls being stupid teenagers. These girls being 15 and 16 years old, because we're all idiots at 15 and 16 years old, on some level. So really, that really changed like my editor really came around after that.
That's really interesting. It's interesting. It went through so many drafts as well. It's like just good to know. Like it takes a lot to get a book
Yeah, you
place.
think I'd be better at this by now. I mean, there really was a time in May of 2024 where I was like, we need to kill this book. I can't solve it. I'm not writing it. My editor was really unhappy with it. I was like, and we had a couple of conversations. Okay, what can we do? Is there anything we can get into shape in the next 3 months? Like, what can we do here? And finally, she was kind of like, it's this or nothing. Like, we're too far down this road. And I was like, fuck. Okay.
Oh, did anything
Yeah.
change after that though? Did you change anything?
Oh, yeah, radically.
Oh,
I mean, yeah, so much. I mean, the whole end of the book has been through that ending scene with the hurricane and everything. That has been rewritten so many times. Miss Parcay, all the scenes of Miss Parcay and the witches have been rewritten so many times. There was so the reason the book has 5 moths on the cover is because there were supposed to be 5 main characters. Myrtle was one of the main characters, and I cut Myrtle after that. Myrtle had a really dark ending, and I loved writing Myrtle. She was so much fun. It was just so much fun. I love writing someone who just denies reality, just like, nope, not pregnant. Next question. It was really, Myrtle was a really dark part of the book, and she got cut. So yeah, a lot of stuff changed after that.
That's interesting. Thanks.
And I think, Gene, you were going to say something.
Yeah. So I guess this is first off, I love the cover of this book. Is there any? Yeah. So I guess, and this is where you can kind of maybe add a little bit. And I know it's a big team effort, but like, what influence, if any, or what imprint, like what do you have, and like what Like, did you pick the outline or the layout or the image or anything of what you're going for, or the color palette or any like, so what is an
Oh yeah.
author's influence over the cover and how that is, especially with this book? Because it's I already have it and I just have it hanging on the back. So it's like,
Oh, thanks.
with the gold, like the gold foil, just, everything. So I guess what, from an author standpoint, do you have, if any, of the artwork, the layout, the color scheme, all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so a lot. But that's me. So I'm sorry, I'm just looking for something right now. Do I have share screen enabled? Let me check. Um, hang on, I'm just checking something here.
I can make you the host if you want, Grady, so you can share screen.
Oh yeah. Would you do that? Do you mind?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. So yeah, so I'll tell you about that in a sec. But basically, so this is a bit of a long story, and I just want to check one thing. If y'all don't mind holding on a quick second, I want to make sure I am doing this properly. Sorry, I know this is like the most gripping part of our conversation. Um, yeah, okay. So okay. So I just want to make sure. Okay. So sorry about that. So basically, I get a lot of leeway with my covers. I was at Quirk, which was my first publisher, which was really small. And my editor over there was this guy, Jason Rakulik. And Jason was the editor in chief at Quirk. But he'd been there a long time. And he really, because it was a small press, he had a lot of control. And this is something you don't get at a bigger house. And he had a really supernatural understanding of sort of what would work in the marketplace. And he wasn't always right. Yes, hidden pictures, exactly. He's a writer now, and it wouldn't always work. I mean, he had some flops, but he really trusted his gut in terms of what a book should look like, what the title should be like, what the book should be, how to sell it, and how that all sort of works out. And I learned a lot from him. And we worked with a lot of really good art directors over there: Tim O'Connell, Doogie Horner, Andy Reid. And we got a lot of back and forth. And Jason really pulled me into those conversations. And sometimes I just listened. I got to see all the comps, all the early drafts, everything. So when I came over to Berkeley, it's a much bigger house. It's part of the Penguin Random House empire, and they don't do that. And but they knew I had this reputation for my books from Quirk, that they had good covers and really high concept covers that people liked. So they gave me a little more leeway, and we did Final Girl Support Group, and there were some real problems with that cover. I mean, they acknowledged. I mean, they're like, we can't get this cover, and so we really worked together, sort of. And I had really specific things that I had learned to say and to look for, and actually wound up like, it was like this thing where like the cover just wasn't working, and I was kind of like, let's rotate the title treatment 25. It was like really specific stuff that I just learned working with Jason and Doogie and Andy and all these folks. And it kind of worked. And so then they gave me a lot more leeway for how to sell a haunted house. And we really worked together on that one. So when it came to this one, they were really like, I had a big voice at the table, which isn't always the case. But it was a long road. I mean, in the beginning, and people tell me if this isn't going, but in the beginning, it wasn't even called Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. It was called All of Them Witches. And so that was what we were doing. And it was a lot of like, I actually thought it was a pretty cool cover. And there were a lot of variations on a lot of other ones with books and things. then we learned that the Ira Levin estate is really litigious, and to use the title of the book from Rosemary's Baby invited litigation that no one wanted, so changed it to Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. And then we started really, they were trying, bless their hearts, they were trying, and the covers weren't bad, but they weren't working, you know, they weren't really capturing the book. And you know, then sort of people went to what you go to all the time when you're doing horror, which is something that's dripping blood. Um, and there was variations that came out. And so then we were like, okay, let's look at everything. And I mean, there were 70 something covers to look at. I mean, they were, and a lot of them were like, oh, here's the scissors in this color, or this color, or this color. They're gonna hear them turn. So it's like not 70 radically different covers, but then, and one of them that they had tried and rejected very early on was the lava lamp. And I was like, that's pretty fucking cool. So then we tried a lot of different lava lamps, but then we tried a lot of colors on the lava lamps. I mean, it was, I mean, some of the color gradations, I mean, this was when we were pretty far down the road, but it was like tweaking this thing, trying to get it right, you know, so it didn't look too Cronenbergy, where it's all made out of the new flesh and stuff. And then once we had the lava lamp and we had landed on it, and I had to write a lava lamp into the book, because I was like, there's no fucking way that this book is going to come out with a lava lamp on the cover where there's not a lava lamp. So,
the old R.L. Stein,
exactly.
incorporating it in, yeah.
Oh yeah, well, it was very, for me, it was always a Roger Corman thing where you always had the poster before the movie. But I had also grown up. I had gotten a lava lamp for Christmas one year when I was a kid, and like I fell asleep to it. It was really this tremendously comforting thing, and so it was actually kind of nice to pull that out. But I was like, now I had a reason to. And you know, it was the Avinash Wirasekara was the lava lamp designer. She was actually, they went to an actual outside artist they hired to do that lava lamp at one point. And I believe it was Emily Osborne who was the art director on this. It might have been Laura Corliss. It was Laura or Emily. I'm sorry, I didn't, you know, it's funny with Quirk, I always work really directly with the art director, and at Berkeley, just because they're so big, you don't really meet, it kind of goes from you to your editor to the art director. Or you to your editor to the marketing and all that people, and then to the art director. So sorry not to get their names on the tip of my tongue. But yeah, so it was a long process. And then I had to put it in the book.
That's cool. Yeah, because I love the cover. And then like even as well as like when you see it across multiple books on the shelf anywhere, you can, with the color scheme, you can pick it out really quick, which is it's cool.
Which is really nice. And, you know, it's funny. One of the things I actually really appreciate about Berkeley, which is not true everywhere, is they very much push to have covers that don't look like everything else on the market. You know, there is, and it's something that art directors default to too, because they have huge workloads, and it's hard to describe to you guys, or to anyone really, I'm not saying you guys, but how much pressure there is on the cover and the title, and especially the cover, because there is this feeling of the title and the cover, that's your marketing, that is it, that is your ad, that's your ad buy. Ads don't sell books anymore. It is cover and title is going to be everywhere. It's going to be on every TikTok, it's going to be in every Instagram, it's going to be on every bookshelf, and the pressure is overwhelming, and you're always like, did we fuck it up? There is no one is more fragile than like me and my editor and the art director and the marketing people during like the months that we're trying to finalize the title and the cover. It's really, and I'm much more uptight about the title than they are, but they are really uptight about the cover. And you always feel like, shit, we made a terrible mistake here. So a lot of times when you see stuff like every book for a while had girl in the title, I mean, I get it. You know, every book for a while had an image of a woman with her back to the camera walking away or something, you know, on it. I get it. You know, you're like, you know, hey, let's bat some singles and doubles. Let's not go too crazy here, because, you know, we might just strike out.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, it's awesome. Like just knowing a lot of it, because I mean, I just with how cool this, like how the story is, and like you said, with how everything, like you said, all the drafts and everything, like what in terms of the art had kind of intermingled with it, and then
Yeah.
you know, some, like you said, with some book empires, you might have more of a say or creative
Sure.
say or not, you know, so it's
Yeah.
cool to have a little bit
Yeah,
more on
I'm really
knowing
lucky.
about
I
that.
mean, I've really carved that out, and Berkeley's been very receptive to it. So, and I learned from Jason and Quirk, which was a great place to learn. All right, who else? Come at me with a question.
Yeah, I have a couple, but
Yeah.
I
I'll try
just
to keep
wanted
my answers a little shorter too, so I can get to them.
I'll only ask one. That way it's,
Nope.
I give some time for everybody else. But I just wanted to acknowledge, I appreciate that you acknowledged that you wanted to remind people throughout this book that they were girls. I love that first quote that you used, that I need you to understand what they did to us when we were girls, because I feel like you can kind of get lost in that. But, and I told you this when I met you in Winston-Salem with Amber,
Oh yeah.
that I really appreciate how you write women. I always go into books written by men who write from a perspective of women, like, okay, yeah, let's see how they get it. But I appreciate all the work that you talk a lot about the work that you did to be able to write from that perspective. And I feel like you nail it every time. Like,
Oh, thanks.
Southern Book Club, favorite book, you know, love that book. But I just want to tell you that I appreciate that.
Thanks. I really appreciate it.
And I wanted, you know, I think that the ending was, and I don't want to jump to the ending, but I want to jump to the ending because I loved it. I think that it was very, to me, it felt very important that, you know, you could have just ended the book with, all right, that was it. We had our babies and the end. We all went and lived our separate lives, but you continued with the letter that kind of gave everyone a like happy ending, sort of, but you didn't have to do that. Was that in the original draft? Did you always intend to do that, or did you feel like something was missing?
All the way from the beginning. I can't write a book that ends ambiguously or that ends with a downer ending. I just feel like people have committed to reading the book. Like I don't want to be the guy who's like, and life's a bucket of shit, live with it. Boom, I'm out. Like I can't do that. Like it's just life's hard, man. Like I can't be someone, you know, bang it on someone's fingers with an oar when they're trying to cling to a lifeboat. Like that's just not me. Um, and I mean, it may be qualified. People may not have all their body parts, but I want people to get somewhere better by the end. So I always knew like the threads came together in different ways, but I always knew that was going to be the ending. The ring to Holly to Fern's daughter or Neva's daughter. And yeah, always.
Yeah. And I loved how even Holly wasn't technically in the ending, but you still closed up her story as well.
Yeah.
With the Raleigh plug. But I think that was important too, to not leave her out, you know.
Yeah. No, I really wanted, you know, everyone's life went in a different direction, right? I mean, Zinnia never reunited with her, or did, but it didn't go great, you know. Fern does, but you know it happens then. And so yeah, and you know Holly's still out there. Like I just wanted to wrap it up. I just thought it was such a drag not to.
Yeah, I thought it was beautiful, so I appreciate
thanks.
it. Good. Great ending.
Who else?
I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could tell us about your aha moment for when you brought the witches in. How did they become who they are?
Oh, so two places. One is the first two drafts were like it was a folk horror book, and my editor was just not working. And my editor was like, what's the show going to be about? Because I do a show instead of a regular author event. I was like, well, the show's going to be about witches. She's like, it's interesting because there's no witches in this book. And we got witches in the title too. You're kind of promising people witches and not delivering witches. And I was like, oh, right. And then the witches really progressed, because it was like, at first it was just Miss Parcay. And then I was like, oh, she's a librarian. And then I was like, oh, right, she's going to have a coven with her. But those all happened at different ones. And then I was like, oh, the thing with sort of them carrying the line, that came a little later. And the real thing for me, though, was I was having a really hard time with the ending. My editor was really pissed about the ending with the witches. It just wasn't working for her. Not pissed, but like I was really frustrated. And I had been reading a lot to sort of get the feel of 1970, a lot of activist literature, Students Against the War, Women's International Terrorist Conspiracy from Hell, Black Panthers, Weather Underground. And a lot of it was really the Anarchist Cookbook, which is, I mean, there's bits from the Anarchist Cookbook, which is sort of like a how to lead a revolution thing that used to circulate. That is like almost word for word in Groovy Witch. Like I mean, I changed it, but like that's, you can read one and then the other and be like, oh, I see the parallels. And I realized, oh shit, my witches are going to be, they are a revolutionary cell. And that suddenly really clicked for me. I was like, oh, I get how they're going to talk. I get how they're going to interact. I get those tensions within the group. I get, how much violence is acceptable. At what point do we become as bad as the people we're fighting? All that stuff really came out of 1970s activist literature. And that's when the witches really started working.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, Melissa, you were saying something.
Oh, I just wanted to say that this book helped me have an open discussion with my mother about pregnancy in the 70s and, before. And so when I asked her, like, why were people like knocking down Holly's door trying to figure out why this young child was pregnant, she's like, oh, no, they didn't do that. Not back then. And she's like, and, she's like, when we go, down to where she grew up. She's like, oh, and we live in a city, we live in Los Angeles. She's like, I can point out some of the pregnancy houses are still there. They just are clinics now. And but she does have a mentality very much like Fern, where she still tells me like, well, I'm not very smart or I'm stupid. And I'm always like, what are you talking about? And reading about Fern kind of helped me understand my mom just a wee bit and what they were kind of ignorant of during that time, because I was born in the 70s, so I don't know much about it.
Yeah.
And she doesn't talk about it.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It's funny. My mom does, and well, hey, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's really nice of you to say. It's funny. My mom does a similar thing to your mom, which is like, she'll be talking sometimes and these attitudes will creep in, or I'm like, man, that is some learned behavior. But then she'll run herself down and really just sort of glib way, like in passing, like hers is, she's like, well, I'm not very popular, or I'm not very like, I've never been very cute or like, social. I'm like, and she'll just move on to whatever else she was saying. And I'm like, that is such a weird thing that must have been said to her so much as a kid, and it's like, just, my mom's 90 and she just said it recently. And my sister and I afterwards were like, what? Like, but it was really crazy. Yeah. And so I get it. What you were saying about your mom, like that stuff, I think you hear something like you're not smart, you're not pretty, you're not good at whatever. And it's enough times as a kid and it sticks with you.
Yeah, because it made me angry when, Fern would say that. Like I would get angry for Fern, like, no, you just don't know what you don't know until you know it.
Right. But that was not, it's weird. My mom didn't go to college because, her family was like, why would we waste college money on a girl? And she wound up going to nursing school instead. But it was just like, why would he spend money on a girl? And so it's just kind of like, yeah, the assumption was, girls just weren't worth much, and they were cute and all that, but there wasn't much to do with them, which I find so bizarre.
Yeah, I know, because I mean, even my age when I was in the 90s when I was a teenager or graduating from high school, my parents had a very similar view, so they did not help me with college.
Right.
So I made it a very staunch choice that I would not do that to my children. So I do have a daughter who's graduating college in May, and my youngest one will be going in fall, and my mom's always, like she'll say like, oh, well, you know, you just need to teach them how to cook and clean. And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
no, no,
Yeah.
no,
It's a
no,
little more complicated than that. Yeah. No,
no.
totally.
Can I add to something to that too, Melissa?
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting correlation, because if we think about the coven, right? Like Miss Parquet was of that mentality too, right? Like she was going to force you if you didn't want to join. If you weren't going to help
Right.
her out, well, guess what? You're going to have to help us. But the other women were forcing her hand to say, well, that's that's not right. Like, you're preaching unity, and then you're going to force her to join. That's crazy. Why are we reinforcing these habits? So
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they're preaching unity and almost empowerment, but then she's not really empowering her to do
yeah,
anything. Yeah.
Well, it's that idea, and that's something I really wanted. So I'm glad that comes across of, you know, to Miss Parseque, it's like, this is what's best for you. I know what's best for you, and I'll force it down your throat if you're not willing to take it. And the younger women and mags are sort of like you said, they're like, wait, what? No, that makes no sense. So yeah, I'm glad that came across, because that's the tension I wanted in that.
Before we wrapped up, I did just want to say, so Artie is, he can't say this, but he did want me to relay it to the group. So Grady, he just wanted to say how much the book resonated with them.
No.
Their mom was 16 when she had them in 89. And even though, even then she had to convince the school counselor, the school counselor was trying to convince her to quit school if she decided to have them. Now she's in the medical field with more degrees than they can count.
Yeah. No, listen, the pressure on these women was so huge. And she was a kid, she was a teenager. And to sort of come through that, like, that takes a lot. That takes a lot.
Yeah. Well, I know we're at the top of our hour. Grady, thank you so much for meeting with us.
Yeah.
This has been great.
No. I really appreciate it. You guys are always fun to talk to. So thanks so much for reading it, and thanks for saying nice things about it.
Of course.
Take care, y'all.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.